Good evening, everybody. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you so much for joining tonight for tonight's episode of Dialogues with Doc. I'm so appreciative of you guys for joining on tonight. I'm so excited about tonight's topic. I'm so excited about my guests. I'm just excited to be excited. Definitely has been a rough week for me. I did lose a family member unexpectedly on last week. So last week, I honestly and transparently did have to push through the show in spite of, but I'm so excited that I did because we had a great conversation about mental health. And we are back tonight, this Wednesday, to talk about Black Male Educators. So tonight's episode is actually the Black Male Educators edition. So we're going to have some Black male educators on. We're going to talk about a host of various topics. So I am so excited to be with you guys on this evening. I'm so excited to talk about and dialogue on this topic. We're going to have a great interactive show on tonight. You guys can always chime in, put in your comments in the comments. Of course, we will highlight, and I'll bring my guests in to interject and exchange as well. And I'm just so excited about being on tonight to do this thing. Of course, I am Dr. Calvin Green, and I am the creator of Dialogues with Doc. Dialogues with Doc is an innovative, unexpectedly new baby of mine. Came up with the idea during quarantine. I just wanted to have conversation and dialogue about a host of various topics. So the first week, if you were hanging with me, we did. The first week was the importance of your dash. So we talked about your birthday, your dev date, and the dash in between. Followed up behind that. The next week, we talked about the power of social media. Last week, we talked about mental health. And this week, I'm so excited to have on some colleagues of mine as we discuss the topic of Black male educators. So this is our Black male educators edition. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to have you guys on tonight. Want to do a quick check-in just to ask everybody how you're doing, where you're from. If you're watching this, where are you watching from? Let us know. Want to do a couple of housekeeping things before I bring my excited guests on and we discuss this topic as Black male educators. So if you're watching right now live, shout out in the comments for me where you are watching from. I see you, Leslie. I appreciate you for even supporting. I know your schedule can be as busy as mine, so you missed the last two. But one of the housekeeping things I wanted to share on tonight is the show is now on YouTube as well. There is a YouTube channel, so I'm so excited that we're streaming live on two platforms, on YouTube and also on Facebook. Mr. Johnson, thank you for shouting us out, man. Thank you for watching from Atlanta. If there's anyone else that's watching right now currently, let us know where you're watching from so we can shout you out because this is going to be a great topic on tonight. And please, please, please share the broadcast as well. Adrian, hey, man, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for watching as well. I appreciate you from Atlanta. Me and Adrian go way back. We both lived for a spurt of time in Dallas, so I'm so excited to see him doing well in Atlanta as well. If you're watching, shout out where you're from before I bring my guests on, and we're going to get this thing going. And remember, like the broadcast, share the broadcast. We're also streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. So if you don't have a Facebook, you can also watch the show live from YouTube as well. So tonight's topic is very important to me. It's about Black male educators and being a professional in the field as well. I thought, hey, let's bring on some of my colleagues to talk about this thing and to just kind of dive into this, but from a different perspective. So it probably won't come from the angle that you're used to hearing from, but we're going to have a great dialogue and conversation about that on tonight. So again, we're on Facebook. Again, we are live on YouTube as well. Like the broadcast, share the broadcast. I'm going to jump right into this thing and start out with tonight's dialogue activator. So each week, if you watch the show, I like to start the conversation off with a dialogue activator. So this week's dialogue activator is called "Cause I Ain't Got No Pencil." Excuse my broken English if you're an English teacher, but that is the name of tonight's dialogue activator. So if you're watching the show, I'm going to share my screen with you guys to jump into this thing of what I mean by "cause I ain't got no pencil." And if you're an educator, there's a poem out there called "Cause I Ain't Got No Pencil," and it pretty much describes the scholars that we deal with each and every day, especially as Black male educators. So it says, just woke up because we ain't got an alarm clock. Dug in a dirty clothes basket because ain't nobody washed my uniform. Brushed my hair and teeth in the dark because the lights ain't on. Even got my baby sister ready because my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time. To eat breakfast, eat us a good breakfast. Then when I got to class, the teacher fussed because I ain't got no pencil. So that's why the name of this poem is called, because I ain't got no pencil. So if you're watching the show live, when you see that poem, go ahead and put in the comments for me how that makes you feel as an individual, especially if you're an educator, because I ain't got no pencil. Chime in on that topic of our tonight's dialogue activator of what you get from that poem before I bring my guests on and we talk about this Black male educators. Talk about this from a Black male educator perspective. If you're watching the show right now, because I ain't got no pencil, I probably said it in the worst broken English ever. But that's how it sounds coming from some of our scholars that we serve each and every day. So we're going to talk about a lot of things on tonight, but I kind of want this poem to kind of drive our conversation tonight as I bring my guest on. So give me 1 second to make some maneuvers here and there. And so I'm so excited about my guests on tonight. I'm about to bring them on. I have the illustrious honor of welcoming two of my colleagues who are in this thing with me. We, amongst the three of us, have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of years in the field. So tonight I'm going to be bringing on none other than Mr. Joseph Spade Jr., who is an educator here in the Washington, D.C. area. And I'm also going to be bringing on Mr. F. Murray Ford, who is an educator in the Atlanta area. So if you give me 1 second, I want to bring them on properly, the way that I bring everybody else on. So give me 1 second. Can you please give it up for my guests that are coming in the room on tonight? I gotta give you a round of applause because you know this is huge. This is huge. I gotta bring my people in the room the right way. So Spade and Ford, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me tonight in this discussion. I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited about what we're going to talk about, the wealth of knowledge that you both are going to bring to the dialogue. But before we get started, you got to tell us a little bit about each of you and where you are from. So, Murray, I'm on 1 year for you to go first on this one, and then I'll bring Spade on home because he's been in this struggle a little bit longer than the both of
us. Well, thanks for having me, Dr. Green. We go back a long way as well.
Man.
How's my volume before we get started? Is it good?
Good.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. All right. So I'm originally from the Memphis, Tennessee area. I was born in Memphis, and I was raised just across the bridge, about 20 minutes from downtown Memphis, in a city called Forest City, Arkansas. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, probably. But that's where I'm originally from. That's about that.
Okay. Anything else? All right, how long you been in this thing as an educator?
Oh man. So I've
lost count, Spade, already.
No, well, I've actually taught in the classroom for about 6 years now. I took a long gap in between, but I'm back in the class, and it's been an interesting ride how I got to this point, though.
Gotcha. Thank you for joining me tonight, man. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Come on in the room.
Come on, you're making me feel real old, man. Like
I'm not. I promise you, I'm not. I promise you, my friend.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Excited to share this opportunity with everybody. So I'm originally from Virginia Beach, Virginia. I've been in DC since 1999. And I started my career as a 6th grade teacher in Oxon Hill, Maryland, in Prince George's County Public Schools. I taught for 7 years, became the assistant principal in Washington, D.C., and then served as the AP for 2 years. And I've been a principal for, 10 years now. So that is my story. Yeah, it goes by quick.
Yeah, it flies by. Like, you join this thing, and I looked up Monday as staff and we were starting the school year off for staff, and I'm like, I've been at this thing since 2005. Like, I've been in education this long, and this wasn't even my journey. I was a business major in college, and I was going to own my own business, and somehow education popped up on the radar, and I'm in this thing as well, and it goes by so quickly. So I want to thank each one of you for being on tonight. This is going to be awesome. I do want to highlight a comment really quickly. I asked about the because I ain't got no pencil, and my cousin's on watching tonight. When I asked what did the poem kind of resonate within you, he said, "We never know what our students are going through or what their socioeconomic conditions are." This is so true. This is so true each and every day no matter what demographic of students you're teaching. You never know what's going on at home, where they're coming from, or what they've actually gone through before they get to us in the morning at 8, sometimes 7:30 in the morning, and we're tripping about a uniform. But that's another story for another day. I'll digress on this evening, and we're gonna jump right into this thing. So, gentlemen, I gotta start the conversation off real quickly with what made you pick the field of education. So, when you think about how long you've been doing this thing, what actually made you say, I want to join the field of education?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like it has always been a passion. I'm not a career changer. I was an education major at Virginia State University. And so for me, it was something that I always wanted to do. It wasn't necessarily that I had educators in my family, but I knew that it was something that I felt like was a calling and was a passion for me. And so I always pursued it. I never saw myself doing anything else in another field. And so for me, I feel like this is what God has called me to do.
I would have to honestly say that it picked me. Contrary to what Mr. Spade just said, I'm totally different. Are you Dr. Spade or Mr. Spade? Which one?
I received a doctorate, but not yet, man.
Okay, I know I'm in the room with the doctors and things. All right.
Right.
So, so it really picked me. So before I start that, I'm a left brain person, a little bit of right brain Calvin. How we both got metal mouse right now at our old age.
So listen, man, the crazy part about it is I turned 40 this year and I got these the day after. So I don't know if I'm going through a midlife crisis or what, but yeah, I got them for the second time.
Okay, this is my first time, but anyway, let me get back on track. All right, so I feel like it picked me because I majored in political science in undergrad, and I was headed straight towards law school. About 3 months prior to graduating from undergrad, my mother died, and so that spent my world a little bit. And I was like, do I really want to do this? What I needed to redirect what I wanted to do. So I got a job working for the government at the Social Security Department. So I was fresh out of college in 2007, processing Social Security cards and making sure people got benefits. And it was completely not what I expected my life to be right after graduating from undergrad. I had a lot of friends who had recently moved to Dallas, and that's where we met, Calvin, in Dallas. And they were telling me, just move to Dallas, just get out of there. A good friend of mine was a teacher in Dallas, and he was like, yo, I think you'd be a great educator. And I had heard that quite a bit. My dad worked in education, just retired a few months back. And so I went in, I did it. I went fully in on it. And my first year was really amazing in Dallas. I did that for about 3 years. And I was one of those people statistically who cycled out of education at that 3-year mark, right? So I moved to Los Angeles and was working in marketing and PR, and that was really going well for me. I accepted a contract that was with the federal government. So I was creating a tobacco cessation campaign with the FDA, and I was having to interact with a lot of 13 to 18-year-olds creating marketing and advertising. And in my interactions with those students, I really found my passion for working with students again. Well, push come to shove, after I created that entire campaign for that organization, that advertising agency, I was fired. It was kind of like everybody that created the agency was fired after we got it. Yeah, it was, I'm gonna be straight up honest. It was an all-white agency, and they hired some black people to create a targeting campaign for black and brown kids. And after they got the keys to the kingdom, they fired all of us and managed it. So I was in Atlanta at that point in time. That job actually brought me back to the city of Atlanta from Los Angeles. And I got back into education, and it has really been a beautiful thing to take the mixture of different skills that I've brought with me from those different professions back to the classroom. So that's kind of how I got back to education. Regardless of how far I tried to run from it and do different things, it has always pulled me back in, and I really feel like I'm at a space where I have honed in, and this is what I want to do with my career trajectory on out.
And I thank you both for that. I love how, and you see me, I'm always taking notes. I got my pen and my little show notes over here. I love how on one extreme, Joe said it's a calling, and then Murray, you said it picked me. I love how I have two different ends of the spectrum on the show tonight. Spade said that he went to school to be, he majored in education. You were a career changer. nowadays it's rare to find people, honestly, that still go to school to be educators. Most of the people coming in are career changers. So I love how back in the day, if you wanted to be a preacher, you went to school for religion. If you wanted to be a teacher, you went to school to teach. But now that we don't find that, and a lot of people come into the profession struggling with the content and the pedagogy because they didn't have the foundational framework like Joe was saying, he went through as an education major, and they come in with varied skills like you, Murray, from just experience, and they even flourish in the classroom just like someone who came in who actually went through the pipeline and the program. So I love that. I love that. I want to ask the next question is, at what age do either of you recall having your first Black male teacher? At what age do either of you recall having your first Black male teacher? And I'm going to give you time to think about it because I'm going to tell you mine. So for me, I don't recall having my first Black male teacher. I remember there was a Black man on the staff, but he ran the ROTC program in my building, or he was a football coach that worked with the school part time. He wasn't actually on the faculty and staff of the school with transitions and preps and things like that. So I don't recall having my first Black male teacher till I went to college at University of Houston. My first Black male teacher was my history professor that I struggled with because it was an 8 a.m. class, and long story, never take 8 a.m. classes unless you're not ready for it. But yeah, that's when I had my first Black male teacher.
I would say sixth grade. My first Black male teacher was in the sixth grade. It was Mr. Dawson. He taught social studies. And, that was a big difference for me because I didn't realize how comfortable I had gotten with having white women as teachers. So from kindergarten on up until sixth grade, I had white women, 100% teachers. And as a student, I didn't know how to approach dialogue, conversation, the learning process with a Black male. Although my father was in education, although I am a Black male, I completely was confused with how to engage with a Black instructional leader. So that was an interesting dialogue. I had to learn, the power plays that go on with learning those situations and dynamics that come along with going into a new classroom. So it was interesting. My first was Mr. Dawson in the sixth grade.
Okay, sixth grade. Okay.
Yeah, that's for me. I never really had a Black male teacher per se, but I had my first Black male experience in high school, and so he was actually the principal. He wasn't even a teacher. Up until high school, I had not seen a Black male educator in front of me that was like leading instruction or leading education. And I remember his name was Mr. Morgan. I'll never forget. His name was Mr. Morgan, and automatically, as soon as I met him, he earned respect from me because I had never seen anybody that looked like me leading education or leading instruction in a way that I was actually able to see him as a principal. And so automatically, I wanted to know more about him. When I saw him in the hallways, I was going to dap him up, right? And it probably was, it wasn't even about I had a relationship with him as a student in the school building, that came, but it was just an automatic respect because I see another Black man leading an instruction in a way that I had never seen before. So automatically, I was going to back him up. I wanted to know what he was about. I wanted to learn more about him. I wanted to watch his moves. Even if I didn't agree with something, a club or a decision that he made, I was never going to say anything against this man because he was the first Black man that I had seen in an educational setting. So for me, it was high school.
What's interesting? What's interesting for me is that my first experience with the Black male teacher was completely the opposite because I had this prototype in my head that a teacher has to be a white woman. I had a hard time receiving instruction from a Black male. Something in my head was telling me this guy can't teach me, or this guy is not a real teacher because I was like, no, white women are teachers, not Black men. So it's really interesting to see how those different dynamics can play out in students' minds and in their heads when they don't see people like themselves in the actual space of doing the job.
Absolutely, representation matters.
Absolutely.
It definitely matters, and it's funny how you both said the same thing but differently, and you pretty much both said the importance of seeing someone that looks like them. That's the key piece. We are that glimmer of hope. We are that ray of sunshine for some of them to just actually see, hey, there's a bigger me or someone that I can relate to because I've never seen this before, or I may have had a negative interaction with someone and it left a bad taste in my mouth for what a black male educator can possibly do for me. So it gives me a second chance in a sense to look at that individual from a different light as a support system. So I love that because it takes a while for young black men to honestly see someone that looks like them early on as they come through the pipeline. Which takes me to my next question. It's gonna get real tonight. Has there ever been a time in your professional pursuits where you were the only black male on the staff? Has there ever been a time in your professional pursuits where you were the only black male on the staff? So honestly, you were the only ray of hope for those black and brown boys in your building because you were the only one.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. When I was a teacher, I got all the black boys that were behavior problems in everybody's classroom. Spade, I need you to talk to him because he needs another male perspective. Spade, I can't deal with him. Like, I remember being the only, not only even just a black male, but just a male, period, in an elementary school setting. So I remember like always getting all the behavior issues, and I'm gonna put this person in your class because I know that you know how to deal with them, and I need you to talk to the parent. And like, yeah, I've absolutely been in that type of setting. And there have also been opportunities where, or not even opportunities, but times where I felt like I was always just a disciplinarian because I was the black man.
Yeah.
It wasn't a lot of, hey, let me take you to go and see Spade's classroom to see what's happening with his instruction and how he's moving his kids. It was, look, he needs another black male. You're the only one in here. I'm gonna need you to take him for the next week. I'm gonna need you to take him for the next hour, the next block. I often found myself in that space as a classroom teacher, as being the only black male in an educational setting. So I'm very familiar with that.
And it's sad because I can do a lot more than just discipline a child. Like you hired me to do X, Y, Z, but I can't fully do the job that I'm actually supposed to do because you're sending me all the kids that are just rambunctious and all over the place, and you just can't handle. So let me send them to Green's room or the space room or the Ford's room because I just don't want to deal with it. Just get out. I don't care where you go, and they end up in your classroom.
Yep. I actually, a funny story, I actually ended up with an all-male classroom because I was the only male in the school building. Now, granted, it was a perfect opportunity because I fell in love with single gender education and had begun the research of it, and even, sat as one of the co-founders of an all-boys school here in DC. And so I feel like, that was definitely an opportunity that God set up. But it was literally, we got all these black boys and we need to do something with them. Spade, this is my principal. Spade, are you interested in leading an all boys classroom? For me, it was like, yeah, I got them anyway. I may as well go ahead and jump on this opportunity. And so I did that for the last 3 years of my teaching career. I had an all boys classroom that followed me from 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade.
I think by virtue of being in Atlanta, it has not been the same for me. I think there may be more black male teachers concentrated in this city than many, by virtue of the diversity of the city. But so I have not had that experience not being the only black male on staff, but I have been the only black male in certain content teams or certain grade levels or certain disciplines. I have been the only black male, and those dynamics are very interesting because you have to approach things from a very different space than everybody else on the team does. You have to walk a line of being a disciplinarian. Sometimes you have to walk the line of, like I mentioned before, a lot of times a lot of young men have not had those type of interactions with older black men. So you have to understand how those dynamics can also be fragile. You also have other dynamics where you have to make sure that within the mix of that discipline, you still have to get the academics across because we still have the standards behind us and we still have the standardized tests behind us. So in the mix of all that, you still have to make that magic happen. So, it's a very fine balance that you have to learn how to walk.
Definitely. My cousin said that he's been in education for 17 years as a history teacher. He's been the only African American in his
Wow.
department for 15 of those years. And he's in Hempstead. He's teaching in Hempstead, Texas, so down about Prairie View. And it's just amazing when you sit back and think of how many times we've been that sounding board by ourselves. And it's caused us to be looked upon as, oh, that's the go-to person for every black child, every black and brown child in the building. And as an educator, I'm so much more than that. I'm so much more. I love how Spade said, give me the advisor with the boys. I have them anyway, or they're sent to me anyway. Let me go ahead and continue to make an even greater impact, because in the end, it's going to help me. As much as you think you're helping them, it's helping me as well, because I have to be that inspiration and that inspiration for them, and the individual that they see that does provide a ray of inspiration and hope for them, that they can actually make it in this thing. So my next question is a toss up, kind of like a popcorn. What are 3 traits you say someone needs to be a successful black male educator? So Murray, you give me 3, and Spate, you give me 3 of just what you think. We've been in this field more than a year, so honestly, I feel like we made it off the island. We're definitely on Survivor All Stars. We wouldn't have made it this far. We wouldn't have made it past the first year if we just didn't have it, what it takes. So we've been in the field long enough. We're on Survivor All Stars, Black Male Educator Edition. What are three traits you think a successful black male educator needs?
The first thing I would have to say is you have to allow your students to you basically have to allow your students to reveal your flaws to you. It's something, certain things kids will say or do or suggest to you that will let you know exactly where your gaps are, where you've fallen short. And this is some things that sometimes your peers, your loved ones, your therapist can't tell you about yourself. Kids have a way of seeing through a lot of things that can reveal some of the slightest things about yourself and character that you can really work on. So if you're open to their process, that's the first thing you have to be. Being the teacher doesn't mean that you're right 100% of the time. So you have to relinquish that belief in your head, and you can learn a lot from your kids. The second thing is the power of listening. Listening. I don't know if the research supports it, but women tend to listen better than men and communicate sometimes better than men. And it's a profession that's dominated by women. So at some point in time, as a male in this profession, you are going to have to learn to manage the dynamics of listening and effective communication with women. So that's the second part. And the third part about it is, or the third thing I would have to say is that you cannot take yourself too seriously. It is extremely important to always find the fun in what you're doing. I'm stumbling over my words. I'm still learning how to talk with these things in my mouth. But you have to.
I got you.
You have to always try to find the fun in whatever you're doing and keep the learning process fun for kids. So you have to do those 3 things.
You got to do that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that you said, and trust me, I feel you about the learning of how to speak with them. You just can't see mine. I have Invisalign. It's the same thing. I totally get it. I absolutely get it. I would just add this, right? I think you have to, one, be prepared. Like, you cannot come in and freestyle a lesson. You can't come in and freestyle what it is that you're going to do because you have relationships with the children, right? There's so much data about our impact as Black men in an educational setting and how we influence them to go to college, how we develop relationships. And because we know there's so much research and our impact on Black boys and on Black children and so forth, we have to be prepared and have to present lessons that move student achievement. You can't just come in and freestyle. You can't just come in and do what you do as a Black male. Oftentimes there are men that are coasting in the educational setting because we Black men. And that's not fair to the children that we serve. So one, as a Black male educator, you have to come prepared, and you got to do the work. You got to lead the work. I think I would also just add just a level of transparency. I often find that when we deal with, as Black male educators, when we deal with other Black boys, we're always saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do. Well, damn it, what can you do? Like we're grown men whole Black male educators in the educational setting, but while we are telling them what they cannot do or what they should not do to keep them out of harm's range, or to keep them out of trouble, or to keep them out of violence, whatever it is that we're trying to, block all from them, those negative things, what can they do? How do I deal with this anger that I'm dealing with? How do I deal with when I go home, I don't have that pencil, and then I come in and you talking about a pencil when I come into your classroom, like, what am I supposed to do with all of those emotions? And then, we got to tackle this whole toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Like, boys need to cry. It's okay. You can cry. What are you supposed to do with all of those emotions? And so there's a level of vulnerability. There's a level of transparency that we have to have as Black male educators, because you're more than just a teacher. You represent something that oftentimes they do not see at home, or they do not see in a positive light. And so in that space, while you may not want to be a role model, you are a role model, and you've got to own that. And you got to be transparent. You're going to make mistakes along the way, but in those mistakes, being honest, like you just said, and because we're not going to always have it right. What does that look like, and what does that sound like, to make sure that we're sharing that with other boys and other children?
And a lot of times what we perceive as anger in our students is really a level of maturity or clairvoyance to see through the BS. There's a lot of things we all know as Black male educators that is systemically still in the system, that is some complete BS. And a lot of the students that are the most upset, they can see the BS and are not afraid to stand up in the class and be like, listen, this is some BS. And those are the ones that are gonna they're gonna take over the class if you let them. So you have to learn how to really basically assess the level of maturity with the children, and then just talk to them straight up. Like, listen, I know you may think this is some BS right here. On a certain level, this is what is important about that. This is what is not as important. You're going to be dealing with stuff throughout life that, doesn't make sense to you right now, so on and so forth. So you really have to assess where the child is and approach them on a real level. If a child, especially a Black male student, sees that you are giving them fluff or BS, same thing with Black girls. If they see that you're not like shooting it straight and not being 100% transparent, or they can see that you're not being, telling what it is, you're going to have problems. You're going to have problems.
Especially in our field, Murray, because we're in the high schools. So, and then Spade has the younger siblings of the kids that we got. So everything you guys are saying is right. From the you can't freestyle the lessons. You got to reveal your flaws. We got to tackle this thing of vulnerability with the toxic masculinity. These are all great points that are that are good traits that you have to navigate this thing successfully. Because if you don't get them and grasp them quickly, they can be a hindrance to you and can eventually hurt you in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Where am I at? Y'all are. The dialogue is going so well. I got to skip around with some of these questions because the responses are flowing into like, well, I can't ask that one now because we covered it already. Have you ever been in a situation where you, as a Black male educator, felt silenced and the population you represent suffered? So think about the work you've done and how you've been in the field, and we're that sounding board, we're that ray of hope, we're that inspiration for the population that we serve, and because of whatever reason we felt silenced and those children suffered. Have you ever had a situation like that?
I feel like you're trying to get me in trouble right now, but I'm just going to keep it real. If we were to really 100% look at the state of education right now, with a lot of things being online, it is going to be extremely important that education leaders understand that all of the training that we've had, all of the research, all of the data, none of it supports what's happening right now. There is nothing out there that we can look at and say and apply this to an elementary, middle, or high school right now. The teachers who are actually doing it right now are the experts in the field right now. And we already know, based on the research, that collaborative schools are some of the best ones. But we see better outcomes when we have collaborative environments where everybody takes an active role in the leadership decision making. It's going to take some extremely reflective leaders with very small egos to listen to teachers and listen to what's going on on the ground to implement strategies that really, really have a solid impact and that work. Because we know teaching is action research all day, every day. So regardless of what strategies we're looking at, the documents that we submit to the district that may look good, the checking off boxes and other, you have to always consult with the people who are doing it, and the teachers are the ones who are doing it right now. So if we really take this moment as an opportunity to let teachers shine, I think this is a great opportunity for education leaders to actually listen to the teachers for what's going on in the classroom. And I'll give a quick example. If I were to submit a lesson plan to an education leader right now who has never taught a class in a digital setting, what relative feedback can you give in regards to the lesson plan and deploying that lesson plan using digital strategies? Because it's a two-step process right now. We're not talking about physical classroom. We're talking about the plan itself, and we're talking about deploying that plan via the digital tools that we've been provided. And if you're not active in there, seeing how those tools are working, what is working, what's not working, where the hiccups happen, what's slowing the energy down, you will not have effective feedback for those teachers. And if you cannot provide effective feedback, then there is no professional learning community. And we already know that if there is no professional learning community, then the student outcomes will suffer. All right. So it's going to be a moment where we have to really look and see, to tie that into what you're saying right now, communicating that in a school building can be a death sentence, right? Because everybody is not able to take that kind of feedback to say, hey, you need to stop and listen to your teachers. Because a lot of people are caught up in titles, a lot of people are caught up in ego, and it's hard to really sometimes take a step back and hear that kind of feedback to where you say, okay, listen, I'm not the building expert on this. So that's really what that's what I'm feeling when you ask that question.
Yeah,
Good points, man. I don't think you're gonna get in trouble, but good points.
you're not getting in trouble, brother. You're good. I think that makes me think about my experience as a classroom teacher and how I often got placed in the space of being a disciplinarian and how to focus on culture. And for me, I think I felt silence because I felt like I was always pushing to get people to come and to actually have conversation with me about academics and how to move children. And so I even recall when I was hired as the assistant principal of the school that I used to be, that I became the principal of, I was actually hired as my title was the assistant principal of school culture. Right. And so like I felt like even in that position, I had to, of course, find the balance between, yes, how to maintain a school culture that's conducive to learning, but also how to see me as an instructional leader. And so I always felt like, there were times where I felt silence as far as the academic space, and that the conversations were going to other people, such as instructional coaches and the principal and those around me. And I need you to focus on school culture. And I like that you got these relationships, and I love these events that you're starting and so forth. It wasn't like I had to push myself in the classroom. I had to do instructional rounds and lead that process and to push myself into that space. So I wasn't silenced as just as someone that could focus on school culture or being a disciplinarian in a school building. And so for me, that reminds me of that experience. And I felt like the children and the teachers that I actually worked with did suffer because I wasn't able to have an instructional voice at the table like everybody else. And so it is about, I saw one of the comments that said it's about balance. Yes, you're going to be the school culture. You're going to be the disciplinarian. It is all about balance. And so sometimes you have to push yourself into that space for them to be able to see that you are just as much an instructional leader as anybody else that's at the table.
And that we keep talking about the discipline thing, and it brings me back to the point where when we keep talking about Black males have to be or are forced into these spaces of discipline. Underneath all of that, it really speaks to an inherent fear of Black men. And when we're looking at the situations that's going on right now in Wisconsin, why do you feel that a Black male has to be the quote unquote disciplinarian? And I really don't like that word, but because it alludes to basically breaking somebody down to obeying the rules via some type of structure. And I don't really like that word discipline too much. But when we look at Black males being forced into the space of being a disciplinarian, it speaks to I don't want to deal with, that child, or I don't know if I'm going to say something wrong, or if that's going to be the wrong way to do this. So a lot of times, by virtue of the numbers, we're forced into those spaces to kind of just, I don't want to deal with that natural fear I have of having to redirect or correct. I don't know if that's going to have a negative impact on my safety or my well-being, because that's really what it translates down to when we get to these real high school level, because even middle school, elementary, people have a fear of Black kids. Hard stop. Okay, and so they feel that would be mitigated by placing somebody who looks like that child in the room with them. So I think it's important for Black males to speak to that. We have to speak truth to that. And if we have leaders who are forcing us into those spaces, we have to have those tough conversations with leaders. Why do you feel that way? Why is your paradigm of thinking that this person cannot handle that child the same way I would be able to? Because that begins to break down the fear of Black men. Because at the end of the day, whether it's the hardest, quote unquote, hardest dude on the block that's in your classroom, once you have those real conversations, you'll realize that a kid is a kid is a kid, regardless of what they look like, regardless of how hard they can inflect their voice, regardless of how many muscles they have. A child is a child, and you have to be smart enough to have a conversation with them to get to that point. And so we have to have real dialogue to get to that point and speak truth to those underlying issues that's happening in the classrooms.
Yeah, I think
Definitely.
that's really important. You have to articulate that. You have to push these conversations in the space.
Mhm.
We talk a lot about these Karens that are calling the police on Black children and Black people in different areas. Well, damn it, that's the same thing that's happening when teachers are picking up the phone call and calling security, picking up the phone and calling security,
Exact same.
calling the principal and calling the assistant principal, because we're not dealing with the root of it. Like, you're fearful of the Black children that are sitting in front of you, and I have to be brave enough as an instructional leader or as a Black male educator in this space to have that conversation with you. I'm not going to keep taking that child. You got to be able to deal with that child, and if you're not the right person for the job, we need to have a further conversation about it.
Mhm.
But you have to articulate that, just like you said.
So so we're seen as what the canary in the coal mine, being a Black man, especially if you have your master's degree, your leadership certification, you're a canary in the coal mine. If you're willing to move, you can pick up the phone on any day of the week and find an assistant principal job if you have your credentials as a Black male. And the thing with that is that we have to understand there's a certain level of privilege with that. Even though we're Black male, there's a certain level of privilege with that. And it's similar to what Mr. Spate mentioned earlier. The first educator he had was a school leader in high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So statistically, the fact that 80% of educators are women and the pipeline of women who are in leadership roles speaks to a certain level of privilege that men have in the field of education. Because although we aren't the majority of the workforce, we are the majority of the people in leadership. And so when we're making decisions and doing different things where we have a majority women staff, we have to understand that educators' workers' rights are also women's rights. So if men are not accepting and owning that privilege they have and not working with the women in their building, then we're a part of that problematic structure that's oppressing women as well. And one of the things I've always tried to communicate to some of my peers, that if we're putting the majority of our female, the word female sounds bad. That's a bad connotation these days. Our women workforce, if we're putting them in situations and standards that are subpar, then that is a women's right issue, because we already know the workforce is majority women. So we have to, as men in this profession, we have more leverage to speak up, and we have more power to make some of these decisions that would alleviate some of the issues with women and the pipeline to women in leadership, as well as some of the issues that we're talking about with these classrooms. So Black male educators specifically have to speak up in a lot of these roles to make sure we're not being a part of that oppressive system to the women who are working in this field as well.
Agreed.
Definitely. I want to share this comment as we're talking. During the 2008 presidential election, when Barack Obama emerged victorious, my all-white social studies department chair chose to ignore this historic moment and talk about the price of bicycles in the early 1900s. I objected mightily and demanded they recognize what happened in America 24 hours earlier. When I taught it to my students, there was backlash, and Mark says he was at a predominantly white high school. These are the issues and challenges that we deal with as Black male educators, because I love how we all talked about the collaborative models, effective feedback, being silenced in the academic sphere. I know culture, but I know academics as well. Like, don't get it twisted. I know both ends of the spectrum, but you want me to just do discipline, and that's not what I'm called to do. I'm called to do so much more. Talk about articulating and pushing the conversations. These are all things that we don't oftentimes get to embark upon. And it's like we have to, how do you say it? We had a Debo our way in the conversation like Debo from Friday, to get you to understand, like, I'm seated at the table because I earned the right to be here, and I can't articulate certain things while I'm sitting at the table, although it may not be what you want to hear. It's the truth, and these are those hard conversations that like you and Murray are both saying we have to have with our counterparts, because when we don't, we create we don't create safe spaces for ourselves or for our scholars, because we continue to silence them when we don't do what we're called to do. So I love how we looked at that question from so many different layers and angles, and y'all came from a whole other direction from when I was looking at it anyway, and I love that. And it takes me to the question of when I said, in the grand scheme of things, would you consider Black male educators as essential employees? Everyone's talking about essential employees, people that work in, and I'm not knocking essential employees at all. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of, I feel like we are. I feel like the work that we do is valued, although it may be hard for people to understand, because it's harder for us a lot of times to, and I'm gonna use myself as an example. When I leave work, sometimes I come home so drained because of what took place with my students during the day. I literally come in the house, take a shower, and sit in the bed in the dark for like an hour, just to like decompress and not try to bring home the problems that my scholars share with me throughout the day. And I'm wondering at 8 o'clock at night, okay, I wonder if Joey ate, if he ate dinner. Those are the different types of things that we go through and that we deal with. So in a sense, I do feel like Black male educators are labeled as unofficially as essential employees, because the kids need to see us. The kids need us. Think about how they communicated with us more in this pandemic, honestly, because they haven't seen us and they're miserable at home. They're ready to come back to school. I'm like, we're not there yet. We're not ready to bring you back in the building, but they want to come to school. School is their safe haven. School is their break from their parents. They've had enough of being at home. School was and I'm at home now, and I can't go outside and play because of COVID. So I miss seeing Mr. Ford. I miss seeing Mr. Spade. I miss them dapping me up in the hallway, saying, get the class on time, tie your shoes, those type of things. So think about it. Would you consider, and you don't have to agree with me, this is just me. I posed the question and I'm telling you how I feel. So chime in, brothers, please.
I would say I think Black educators, period, are essential employees. I think, we play a role as Black male educators in the educational setting. And yes, we do need to, we are considered essential employees, but I think just Black educators, period. I am concerned about, this space of education and who's telling the story. And so I think it's incumbent upon us as Black educators, whether you're male, whether you're female, whether you're whatever the case may be, as Black educators, I think we're all essential employees in the space, because it is now time to ensure that the stories that need to be told, and when we talk about social injustice, how to deal with it, and some of the concerns of what you just said about that our children are dealing with at home, we and the children that we serve need to be able to interact with children that look like us, and they need to see us in the space, and we need to ensure that when we come to the table, we're coming correct. Right? Like we're not, we talked about the freestyle, like you can't freestyle. Like Black educators, period, are essential employees. I wouldn't just limit it to Black male educators. I think just Black educators, period, are essential.
So I agree with,
and I totally agree. I just was, folks, ladies, I'm coming. I'm having a Black female episode. I'll get some of y'all on there too, and one day we're gonna both from both genders be on the Black male educator edition. So it's coming, I promise you. I just ain't got there yet.
They getting you right now. Yeah, so I agree with both of you, but I agree and from a totally different angle. So I agree that black male teachers, as well as black women educators, are essential employees. But I believe essential employees is a like a Department of Homeland Security definition, and it basically goes to the root of whether or not um, this professional or this person is essential for the infrastructure and the operations of maintaining daily life, for American standard of living. So whether you work in IT, so IT right now is really essential, right? Healthcare workers,
Hmm.
all of this. So the definition of essential workers, it does include educators, but the real reason educators are essential employees, I personally believe is because we're not addressing a lot of other social issues that are going on in our communities. Number one, the cost of childcare is too high. If children are not in schools, then the infrastructure and operations of most homes cannot function if there's not someone to take care of their child in the daytime. So we're
Hmm.
essential employees in their regard. Also, too, if your child has a serious mood or behavioral disorder, it is mentally draining and tiring to have to not get any breaks whatsoever. We already know we're dealing with a lot of single parent households. So a lot of times, um, the school is that break for parents just to kind of get a little moment. Even if the child doesn't have any mood disorder, sometimes people need breaks from folks that they love dearly. So to break up that space, y'all know what's going on. We all been quarantined, so you need breaks sometimes.
Listen.
So we're essential employees from the aspect of society not wanting to address and fix its flaws. Because if we really look at the narrative of what a lot of people were saying about public schools prior to right now, the majority of the language was that public schools are failing. Let's send a child to a private over here, a charter, because public schools it's not working right. So for all of this banter to be going back and forth and a political argument to be made whether schools should be open or not over something that a lot of people just a few months back were saying was failing as a teacher is somewhat baffling to me. So we have to start asking what the real questions are and what the real issues are. So in a lot of aspects, yes, educators are essential employees, but I would hope at some point that society restructures the way it is viewing educators. As a teacher, I know, and I've had older aunts, and my father was an educator. The level of esteem and social um, social power that came with the title of being a teacher in your community, it does not exist anymore. And so
Hmm.
we have to restructure some of the social spaces that we have for teachers and be and treat those spaces a little more sacred than we do in order to get to the answer to some of those bigger social questions.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, definitely. I shoot, this hour goes by so fast, and y'all just dropping all these nuggets that um okay, I'm gonna stay on schedule. I'm stay on schedule. Just a few more questions, I promise. I want to kind of close it out like with these questions kind of like on a high note just to kind of lighten the journey, kind of add a glimmer of light to the journey that we're all on each and every day in the profession. Um, just think about it from this perspective. What are some words of encouragement for our fellow educators as we enter back into our roles in the midst of this pandemic? So, if you had to take a moment and just offer up some words of encouragement to Black educators, period, whether they're male or female, as we enter back into our roles, school has started for some of us. School is professional development has started for some of us, and the children are coming back on Monday. Like, what can you give us to stay encouraged to get my mind right to deal with COVID education, virtual education. We don't know how long this is going to be. They're saying one thing, but we're doing another, and we're trying to keep this smile on our face while the wheels and the wheels on the bus are going round and round in between my left and my right brain.
State, think about the kids. That's at the end of the day, the kid is the end. the end of is what we're here for. So keep them in mind as we go through all these changes. And as adults, we have a lot more power to, to adjust our situations. A lot of our kids don't. So we have a responsibility to be that light in the tunnel. So keep the kids in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing I would just say is seize the opportunity. Like we've been talking about educational reform. We've been wanting to do something different for children. We've been wanting to think outside the box. Damn it, now is the time to make it happen. Like education and the way we know it and traditional education is no more. We'll never go back to the way we have educated children before. And so what I've been sharing with my staff is that we have to seize this opportunity and change our mindset to see it as an opportunity and what we're going to do with the opportunity to flip education on its head. Right? Like how everything that we wanted to do when we think about curriculum and when we think about the social emotional needs and we think about the trauma that our children deal with, like all of that now is to the forefront. And we've got to take this opportunity and really shift what we've seen taking place in education. But we've got to see it as an opportunity first.
Most definitely.
Most definitely. I love how now is the time. Like if there's ever been a time for us to make an impact as educators, period, now is the time. In reality, we're mom and dad for some of these students that we see each and every day. We're that big brother. I just signed on to be the coach, or I just signed on to be the teacher, but I'm that mentor. I'm that sounding board. I'm that I'm that vocal compass for some of them because they don't have a compass outside of the building because they're just all over the place. So it's just important that we continue to stay encouraged and keep the children first, like Murray is saying, and like you're saying, Spade, as well. It's just important that sometimes we forget why we're called to do this thing. And Spade, we're in the same network. We're always asked to remember our why. Why do we do this work? Why are we called to do this? Why are we in this struggle each and every day? And it's about the kids that we deal with. It's about the kids that we I don't even want to say that we teach. It's about the kids that we experience. It's an experience with each and every child, and the experience is different. Every experience with every child is different, and I have to a lot of times condition myself to remember. You know what? Yeah, they cuss me out, but at the end of the day, they're still a child. They're still that piece of clay that I can take and help mold. And I can joke about it a year later. Yeah, remember when you cussed me out because I don't want to give you a tie for your uniform or whatever, and now we're the best of friends, and now you taking me to lunch to get you something to give me something to eat. So it shows us that we are definitely called to do this thing. We're definitely chosen to do it, and we are definitely needed, male and female, as educators, black educators, to do this work because we can't do it by ourselves. Definitely, good word. Thanks, Pathways. My cousin said we must make sure that our black kids don't fall behind in the virtual world. That's definitely good as well as another word of encouragement. One thing I found out today actually was, one of my kids came for a hotspot, and he said the hotspot wasn't working well over the summer. We'll come to find out there are two kids in the same house using the same hotspot. So of course, when you go virtual and you're using the internet, it weighs it down and slows it down. So they had to kind of do their work at different times as the year ended because they couldn't both be on the hotspot at the same time logged on. So, we're learning each and every day through this thing how we successfully can navigate this this work that we're doing virtually, because it's going to be very important now virtually, especially how we support our scholars as we move forward for however long this is going to be. We all went out in March thinking, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe. And we still pushing through this thing like, yeah, I miss my kids, but we're in the midst of a pandemic, and I'm not trying to go back in that building.
And with that comment, it's important that people understand what's going on politically with the education. It's so important for people to understand what's going on with education politically. I know Georgia put in a waiver to not have to do standardized testing. We're talking about students getting behind. Now you imagine students not having real face-to-face instruction for a year and then doing standardized tests and what the numbers are going to look like. We're going to see drastic achievement gaps, and those gaps are most likely going to be in Black and brown communities. I'm not sure where it is right now, but I know the state of Georgia submitted a state waiver to the federal government to basically not have to do the standardized testing. And at this time, the federal government is not responding to states on whether they can or cannot do standardized tests. So every state is basically just kind of weighing in the balance and not really knowing what we can and cannot do. And it's intentional at this point. So it's kind of scary because at the end of the day, we're going to see huge gaps in the communities that were already there that are going to be much bigger than they were before we started.
Definitely. You know, it's a sad day when we're fighting to keep our schools closed, but the leadership of the country is wanting to. I want all schools open in the fall, but your son's school isn't open. The first son school says we're not opening it at all, but you want all the other kids to be exposed and not have that extra support to keep us all safe. And it's, you know, I'm not gonna get on my soapbox because I'm doing good tonight because my brothers are holding me down. But I want to do this one last check-in with my brothers, and I want to thank the both of you so much this evening. I got to do a check-in with my brothers. As a Black male educator, how are you navigating through this pandemic, both personally and professionally? So I'm checking in with both of you as we close this thing out tonight. How are you? How are you navigating through this thing? We've talked about a lot of heavy things tonight, and we've covered a lot of information. But I want to check on you guys. Like there was a post I saw the other day. I think it was today. Check on your Black male brothers. You know, we're out here and we're navigating as well. But some of us are not okay. Like some of us are we're just here. So how's Fade and how's Ford?
Yeah, I'm gonna say more patience and more grace. Like extending it to other people, extending it to myself. Like, you know, I actually just shifted the schedule today, this evening, based on what I felt like my staff has just been feeling overwhelmed, right? It's been a lot of professional development. It's been a lot of like, you know, hey, this is what we're changing. This is what the schedule looks like. And these are the expectations. And you have to be mindful of the fact that we are not teaching at home just to be teaching at home. We're teaching in the middle of a pandemic, and not just one pandemic. We talking about social injustice. We talking about everything in the political realm. And like, it's just a lot going on. And so we have to be mindful of, you know, ourselves, making sure that we give ourselves more grace and more patience, and also extending that to other people as well. Like, I'm not about to sit here and give you the same expectations or the same demands that we had when we were in a brick and mortar building. That's not realistic. You have a 2-year-old child that is not going to school, just like the children that you're teaching in front of you. And so how am I create provisions in the schedule for you to have time with your children, but to also give some of that time over to the children that you serve? And so it's about that balance. It's about that patience and that grace, and recognizing that people are dealing with the same pandemic that you're dealing with. And while you make mistakes in the space, give yourself more grace and more patience as well. So like that for me has been like my theme. Like I'm giving
patience and more grace.
And I'm giving myself more patience and more grace, because this is what we need at this time. Like, it's not school as usual. And so in that space, how am I creating that space for others as well as for myself? That's how I've been making.
Definitely, man.
I'm gonna take words from that because I'm not doing too well over here. My thing is when shit.
That's real,
my
man.
thing is because if something is not working, right? Come on, somebody. If something is not working, change it. And a lot of times, and this is our first week, and so if I see a lot of things that are chaotic, it is a natural order for me to try to pull things into order out of chaos. And so, but you're still working with a team of people. So I'm having to balance my natural wanting to fix things with other people's things that they have going on too. And so for me professionally, I think this is a wonderful opportunity for me to learn that side of balancing my natural nature of wanting to grab the reins and pull everything into order, and allowing everybody a space to figure it out for themselves too. So I'm using that energy to focus on me and my students in my classroom. But the systemic operational things, the systems changes that need to happen with people trying to operate with business as usual in the classroom when life had before our very eyes has changed. We got to fix that. And at some point, somebody's going to have to knock some people upside the head, not physically or literally, but everybody's going to have to get it that business has changed in education. The leaders are going to have to get it. The teachers are going to have to get it. The students are going to have to get it. So, until that process levels out, until the people start peeping their heads out and having those tough conversations, and it's probably going to have to be me because I usually make my own gravy and gasoline it up pretty good. But it's going to have to happen. Somebody's going to have to do it. So if y'all hear about me on the news starting a revolution down here in Atlanta, just know that it's for just know that it's for.
I'm gonna know it's good trouble, brother.
It's good trouble.
It's good trouble. It's good trouble.
It's good trouble.
I love it. It's definitely good trouble. If you get down in Atlanta, we'll find somewhere for you in DC, Murray. So come stir some good trouble up in the district.
Yep.
Well, my brothers, I thank you guys so much this evening for joining me for Dialogues with Dr. Black Male Educator Edition. You both have shared a wealth of information. There's been so much to come from what you guys have both said, and you saw me over here dozing off. I was over here. I'm always taking notes, so it is what it is. It's just I'm always taking notes, and it helps me, to kind of perfect my craft even more just from listening to the both of you and just attempting to moderate, because you guys basically just didn't even need me. Y'all just was going, and I'm just loving it. I'm just over here writing, just going at it. But I want to tell the people how they can keep up with you, how they can get in contact with you. I want y'all to book my people, book Space, book Ford. They'll come to your school, do professional development, whatever you want them to do. They'll provide insight. We can do some collaborative models and all that kind of stuff. Tell people how they can keep up with you.
So I'm at Educator Ford on Instagram and Twitter. It's at Educator Ford, F-O-R-D, like my last name.
Okay, Educator Ford. Y'all follow him.
So you can find me on Instagram, Joe Classic, JoeKlassic on Instagram. And then it is Joseph Spate on Facebook. Feel free to join me. Let's grow.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that has been this week's edition of Dialogues with Doc. Ladies, I have not forgotten about you. The Black Female Educator Edition is coming. Also, my folks in higher ed, the Blacks in Higher Education panel is coming as well. But I'm going to take a break next week and do parenting in a pandemic. So I have some guests coming on next week. We're going to talk about parenting and navigating through this pandemic. So I'm so excited about next week's topic as well. This has been Dr. Calvin Green for this week's edition of Dialogues with Doc, the Black Male Educator Edition, with Mr. Joseph Spade Jr. and Mr. F. Murray Ford, two awesome educators in the DC area and in the Atlanta area. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Stay safe and pray for us as we continue to do this work that we've been called to do, that we can't get out of it even if we tried. Can I get an amen on that, gentlemen?
Amen. And prayers for the Gulf Coast too, that's dealing with this hurricane situation that's happening.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Prayers for the Gulf Coast. That it takes me back to 15 years ago with Katrina. Like the exact same time. Mm-hmm. It was the exact same time as when they dropped the students off in New Orleans and then Hurricane Katrina came through. So definitely keeping those in the Gulf Coast area in our prayers. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Please share the broadcast. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. This is Dr. Calvin Green with my brothers, and we're out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.